Hello, girls and boys. Well, it's that time of day again when we're here for our bedtime story. Now, I hope you've had a really good day today. I hope you've had something to do that you've enjoyed, and I hope that you've had something to eat that you've enjoyed too. I'm sure there's been some yummy breakfast or some yummy lunch or some delicious dinner that you've managed to have. Now, are you snuggled down? And are you ready for today's story? Our story today is taken from this book. It's the Big Alfie Out of Doors storybook. And in this book, there are lots of different stories, and they're all written by Shirley Hughes. And today, our story is called Alfie Goes Camping. And the reason I've chosen this one is because on our Facebook page, quite a few of you over the last few weeks have tried camping in your garden. So I thought, let's read the story about Alfie who goes camping. So let's begin. One summer afternoon, Mummy hung a sheet over the washing line and weighted it down with some stones on either side. Alfie crawled inside. It made a really good tent. "I'm camping," Alfie called out. "This is my tent and nobody can come in unless I say so." But Annie Rose, who was Alfie's little sister, was already coming in through the other end, uninvited. Alfie went indoors and brought out some important things to put in his tent. He brought a colouring book, some crayons and a saucepan, his old blanket and his knitted elephant. He spread a rug inside and some cushions to sit on. Real campers cook their food over a campfire and eat it sitting on the ground, Alfie told Annie Rose. So they put some bits of grass into the saucepan and cooked over a pretend fire. After that they went inside the tent and they lay down on the cushions. Alfie pretended it was night time and there was a forest all around full of wolves, snakes and snarling tigers. Annie Rose was not quite sure whether she liked this part of the game, and she soon trotted indoors to find her mummy. I think she was a bit scared of the animals that Alfie said were there. Alfie was still in his tent when Daddy came home from work. He brought out a mug of tea and drank it sitting by Alfie's campfire. Daddy told Alfie that he owned a real tent when he was a boy and had slept in it all night. "I'll look in the loft and see if it's still there," he promised. "And if it is, we might try it out next time we go to visit Grandma in the country." Dad did find the tent. Alfie was very excited when the time came to put it up in the field next to Grandma's house. Everyone came out to watch. It was big enough for 2 people to lie down. Annie Rose was too little to go camping, so it was just going to be Alfie and Dad. They had brought proper foam mattresses and sleeping bags with them from their house. "Oh, I hope it doesn't rain," they said. Alfie could hardly wait until bedtime. He kept going in and out of the tent to check that everything was ready. He had put his blanket and elephant beside his sleeping bag. Dad had put an electric torch beside his sleeping bag. At last, bedtime came. Alfie had a wash and put on his pyjamas and cleaned his teeth and put on his dressing gown as usual. He wanted to cook over his supper over a campfire, but Dad said that might be a little bit difficult. Instead, they had supper in the kitchen, jacket potatoes and baked beans. Grandma gave them some apples to take with them into the tent. Then they set out. It was strange, not going upstairs to bed, but down the garden, through the gate, and into the field. It was still light. Dad and Alfie sat in front of the tent with a blanket around them and ate their apples. They watched the sun go down behind the trees. They watched the sky change colour. They saw the birds swooping and calling to one another. They sat there until it was quite dark and the stars came out one by one. It was very mysterious to be outside at night under the big sky, with rustling noises all around and the wind blowing the branches over and about. But Alfie felt very safe being there with Dad. Just before it was time to settle down, Alfie jumped up, scampered off across the field and did a little dance all by himself under the stars. Then they climbed into their sleeping bags and Alfie cuddled up to his blanket with his elephant in beside him and he went off to sleep. When he woke up, it wasn't morning. It was the middle of the night. It was completely dark, not like being in a bedroom with the light shining in from the landing, but pitch black all around. Alfie put out his hand. He could feel Dad's back next to him, all curled up inside the sleeping bag. Alfie lay still and he listened. He could hear noises all around him outside, strange creakings and flappings. Inside the tent, he could hear Dad breathing, but then Alfie realised that he could hear something else breathing too, and that something was outside the tent. Alfie sat up. He didn't scream. He didn't even cry. He just leaned over and wrapped his arms around Dad's neck and squeezed him tightly. Then, of course, Dad woke up. Now the breathing thing was just near their heads. It was a very snorty, snuffly sort of breathing. They could hear it moving too. It was trampling about in the grass. Then it went round to the tent where the zip opened, which Dad had not quite done up, and whatever it was started to push against it. Alfie was quite sure that something huge and horrible was coming to eat them up. He began to scream and scream. "It's okay, Alfie," said Dad. He felt for his torch and switched it on. Then they saw a big pink nose coming through the tent flap. It had very large wet nostrils. "It's a pig," said Dad, and he bravely got out of his sleeping bag and gave the nose a big push. Alfie stopped screaming. He and Dad crawled out of the tent. It did not seem quite so dark outside. The pig moved a short distance away and then it stood there watching them. "I didn't know Jim Gatting had put his pig in this field," Dad said sleepily. He tried to make the pig go away, but it wouldn't. After a while, they tried to go back to sleep in the tent, but the pig kept trying to join them. In the end, there was nothing for it but to take the tent down. They collected up their belongings and they carried them back into Grandma's garden. It took several journeys to and fro. The pig followed closely behind them. When Dad finally closed the garden gate on the pig, it stuck its snout through the bars and watched them. Dad told Alfie that they couldn't very well wake up everybody else in the house at that time of night, so they'd better put the tent up in the garden. Alfie thought that was a very good idea. At last they got the tent back up and crawled into it, and the pig got tired of watching and he wandered off into the field. Dad and Alfie dozed until it was nearly light. When Alfie woke again, Dad was still fast asleep. Alfie crept quietly out of his sleeping bag and stood in the wet grass in his bare feet. The curtains of Grandma's house were still tightly drawn, but the sun was up and the birds were making a great noise. Alfie felt very special to be the only person awake and out of doors that sunny morning, and he made up his mind to ask Dad if they could go camping that very night. And that's the end of that story. So, I wonder whether that's ever happened to you when you've been camping. Have you been woken up by something, a noise in the middle of the night? Or did you sleep so soundly that you didn't hear anything outside your tent? I would imagine in your gardens, if you've slept out there in tents, you haven't had a pig to wake you up in the middle of the night. But if you have, I'd love to hear about it. And maybe we could write a story about you camping in the garden and a pig coming to wake you up in the middle of the night. Well, that's the end of our story now. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that the story about camping made you think about things that you've done too at home. Well, it's time to go to sleep now, or at least to get ready for bed. So have you done those 3 things? Have you cleaned your teeth? Have you been to the toilet for the very last time? And are you wearing whatever you wear for bed? And you've got ready and you're all sorted and organised for your sleeping time. So it's time to say goodbye. And it's time to say goodnight. So good night from me to you. Sleep well, girls and boys. Night, night.